The classroom door burst open with such force that it slammed against the wall, making every student jump in their seats. A tall man in an expensive gray suit walked in, his shoes clicking sharply against the floor. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard as steel. Mrs. Patterson froze mid-sentence, the piece of chalk still pressed against the blackboard. She had been writing the words "Lily Chun does not belong here" in large letters for the entire class to see. "What?" the man said slowly, his voice quiet but somehow filling every corner of the room. "Do you think you were doing?" Mrs. Patterson's face went pale, then red, then pale again. The chalk fell from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Behind her, 12-year-old Lily sat at her desk in the back corner, tears streaming down her face, her backpack already packed because she had been told to leave and never come back. The other students sat frozen, some with their mouths hanging open, others looking down at their desks, pretending they hadn't seen anything. The man in the suit took 3 steps into the room. "I asked you a question, Mrs. Patterson, but we are getting ahead of ourselves. To understand how this moment came to be, we need to go back to where it all started 3 months earlier, on a warm September morning when Lily Chun first walked through the doors of Riverside Middle School. Lily had moved to the small town of Millbrook with her mother just 2 weeks before school started. Her father had passed away the year before, and her mother had taken a job at the local library to make ends meet. They lived in a tiny apartment above the old hardware store on Main Street. The apartment was small, with cracks in the ceiling and a heater that only worked half the time, but Lily's mother always said they should be grateful for what they had. "Remember, sweetheart," her mother told her on that first day of school, adjusting Lily's collar and smoothing her hair. "Be kind to everyone, even if they are not kind to you. Kindness is like a seed. Sometimes it takes a long time to grow, but it always grows eventually." Lily nodded, even though she was nervous. She had always been shy, and making new friends was hard for her. At her old school, she had been bullied for being quiet and for looking different from the other kids. She hoped Riverside Middle School would be better. The school was bigger than she expected. The hallways were long and painted a pale yellow color that reminded Lily of old butter. Students rushed past her, laughing and talking with their friends, barely noticing the new girl with the worn backpack and second-hand clothes. Lily clutched her schedule in her hand and tried to find room 204, her homeroom class. We share powerful stories that uncover hidden truths and challenge perspectives. Subscribe to stay updated, share to keep others safe, and comment where you're watching from. When she finally found it, she took a deep breath and walked inside. The classroom was half full of students, all chatting and joking with each other. At the front of the room stood Mrs. Patterson, a woman in her late 50s with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and thin lips that seemed to naturally form a frown. She wore a brown cardigan that had seen better days and glasses that sat low on her nose. "You must be the new student," Mrs. Patterson said, looking Lily up and down in a way that made Lily feel like an insect under a microscope. "Lily Chun, is it?" "Yes, ma'am," Lily said quietly. "Speak up, girl. We don't mumble in my classroom." "Yes, ma'am," Lily repeated, louder this time, feeling her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Mrs. Patterson pointed to a desk in the back corner of the room. "You can sit there, and I expect you to follow all the rules in my classroom. I run a tight ship here. No talking out of turn, no daydreaming, and absolutely no excuses for late or incomplete homework. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." Lily hurried to her seat, aware that every eye in the classroom was on her. She sat down and tried to make herself as small as possible, folding her hands on her desk and staring straight ahead. The other students gradually lost interest in her and went back to their conversations. The first few weeks of school were difficult. Mrs. Patterson seemed to have taken an instant dislike to Lily, though Lily couldn't understand why. She always did her homework on time, never talked out of turn, and tried her best in every assignment. But no matter what she did, it was never good enough for Mrs. Patterson. When Lily got an A on her first math test, Mrs. Patterson accused her of cheating. "There is no way you could have solved these problems on your own," she said, holding up Lily's test paper in front of the whole class. "I want you to stay after school and take the test again while I watch." Lily's hands shook as she took the test again that afternoon, with Mrs. Patterson sitting at her desk, watching her like a hawk. Lily got every single question right again, but instead of apologizing, Mrs. Patterson just frowned and said, "I'll be watching you more carefully from now on." In English class, Lily loved to read. She would often finish the assigned reading days before it was due and would raise her hand to share her thoughts about the books they were studying. But every time Lily raised her hand, Mrs. Patterson would ignore her and call on other students instead. Once, when Lily was so excited about a book that she forgot to raise her hand and just blurted out her answer, Mrs. Patterson snapped at her in front of everyone. "In this country, we raise our hands before speaking," she said, her voice dripping with meanness. "Perhaps they did things differently where you come from, but here we have rules." The other students giggled, and Lily felt tears prick at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She remembered what her mother had said about being kind, even when others were not kind to her. But there was one bright spot in Lily's school life, and that was a girl named Emma Rodriguez. Emma had curly brown hair, bright green eyes, and a smile that could light up a whole room. She sat 2 desks away from Lily in Mrs. Patterson's class. Unlike the other students who either ignored Lily or occasionally whispered mean things about her when they thought she couldn't hear, Emma was different. One day, about 3 weeks into the school year, Emma saw Lily sitting alone in the cafeteria, eating the peanut butter sandwich her mother had packed for her. Emma walked right up to Lily's table and sat down without asking. "Hi," Emma said brightly. "You're Lily, right?" "I'm Emma. That math test last week was so hard. How did you do on it?" Lily was so surprised that someone was actually talking to her that it took her a moment to respond. I did okay," she said carefully. "Just okay? I heard you got a perfect score. That's amazing. I'm terrible at math. I got a C-. My parents weren't thrilled about that." Emma opened her lunch bag and pulled out a sandwich and an apple. "Hey, do you want half of my turkey sandwich? My mom always packs me too much food." And just like that, Lily had her first friend at Riverside Middle School. Emma didn't care that Lily was quiet or that she wore hand-me-down clothes or that she was different from everyone else. Emma just saw Lily for who she really was, a kind, smart girl who deserved to have a friend. Over the next few weeks, Lily and Emma became inseparable. They ate lunch together every day, studied together at the library where Lily's mother worked, and even had sleepovers on the weekends. Emma's parents were warm and welcoming, always happy to have Lily over for dinner. For the first time since her father had died, Lily felt like she had a real home, a place where she belonged. But Mrs. Patterson seemed to hate their friendship. Whenever she saw Lily and Emma talking together before class started, she would separate them. "Emma Rodriguez, move to the front of the classroom," she would say. "And Lily-chan, you stay in the back where you belong." One day in October, the class was studying American history. Mrs. Patterson was talking about the Founding Fathers when Emma raised her hand. "Yes, Emma?" Mrs. Patterson said with a smile. She always smiled at Emma and the other students, just never at Lily. "Mrs. Patterson, I was wondering if we could also learn about other people who helped build America, like the Chinese workers who built the railroads or the Mexican farmers who—" "That is not part of the curriculum," Mrs. Patterson interrupted, her smile disappearing. "We are studying real American history, not—" She paused, her eyes sliding over to Lily. "Not the history of people who came here later." Emma frowned. "But Mrs. Patterson, those people were real Americans too. They worked hard and helped build." "Emma, that is enough. Do not question me again, or you will find yourself in detention." Mrs. Patterson's voice was sharp as a knife. "And I suggest you choose your friends more carefully. Sometimes people can be a bad influence on us." The classroom went completely silent. Everyone knew Mrs. Patterson was talking about Lily. Emma's face turned red with anger, but before she could say anything else, Lily reached over and gently touched her friend's arm, shaking her head slightly. It wasn't worth it. Mrs. Patterson would only make things worse for both of them. After class, Emma was furious. "I can't believe her. She's so mean to you, Lily. It's not fair. We should tell the principal." But Lily shook her head. "It'll just make things worse." My mom always says that some people carry so much hurt inside them that it spills out onto others. Maybe Mrs. Patterson is hurting about something. Emma looked at her friend with amazement. How can you be so nice about someone who's so awful to you? Lily shrugged. Because being mean back won't make anything better. It'll just make more meanness in the world. But things were about to get much worse. In November, the school held a Thanksgiving food drive to collect cans and boxes of food for families in need. Each classroom competed to see who could collect the most items. Emma had a great idea. Lily, we should organize our class. We could make posters and go door to door in the neighborhood asking for donations. We could totally win this. Lily loved the idea. Together, they spent hours making colorful posters and flyers. They drew turkeys and wrote inspiring messages about helping others. On Saturday, they went around Emma's neighborhood, knocking on doors and explaining about the food drive. People were generous, and by the end of the day, they had collected 3 large boxes full of canned goods and other non-perishable food items. On Monday morning, they brought all the boxes to school, excited to add them to their classroom's collection. But when they walked into room 204, Mrs. Patterson was waiting for them, her arms crossed and her face twisted in anger. "And just what is this?" she demanded, pointing at the boxes. "It's for the food drive, Mrs. Patterson," Emma explained happily. "Lily and I collected all of this over the weekend. Isn't it great? We might actually win." Mrs. Patterson's eyes narrowed. "You two did this on your own? Without asking for permission first?" Emma's smile faltered. "Well, we didn't know we needed permission. It's for the school food drive. We were just trying to help." "I decide what happens in my classroom," Mrs. Patterson said coldly. "I decide who participates in what activities. You should have asked me first." She turned her glare on Lily. "And you, I suppose you think you're some kind of hero now, don't you? Trying to make everyone else look bad." "No, ma'am," Lily said quietly. "We were just trying to help people who need food." "Don't talk back to me," Mrs. Patterson snapped. She picked up one of the boxes and carried it to the corner of the room, dropping it roughly. Several cans fell out and rolled across the floor. "These donations will not count toward our classroom total. Since you didn't follow proper procedures, they are disqualified." Emma's mouth dropped open. "But that's not fair. We worked so hard. Life isn't fair, Miss Rodriguez. The sooner you learn that, the better. Now take your seats. Both of you." Lily felt her heart sink, but she picked up the cans that had rolled across the floor and quietly put them back in the box. She could feel the other students staring at her, some looking sympathetic, others just glad it wasn't them being yelled at. That afternoon, Emma was so upset that she went straight to the principal's office. Principal Martinez was a kind woman in her 40s who had been running Riverside Middle School for 5 years. She listened carefully as Emma explained what had happened with the food drive donations. "I'll look into this," Principal Martinez promised. "Thank you for bringing it to my attention, Emma." The next day, Principal Martinez came to room 204 during class. She spoke quietly with Mrs. Patterson in the hallway for several minutes. Through the small window in the door, the students could see Mrs. Patterson's face getting redder and redder. When she came back into the classroom, she looked like she had bitten into a lemon. "It appears," she said through gritted teeth, "that the donations collected by Miss Rodriguez and Miss Chun will count toward our classroom total after all. Principal Martinez has corrected my interpretation of the food drive rules." Emma grinned at Lily, and even some of the other students looked happy about the news. But Lily saw the look in Mrs. Patterson's eyes, and she knew things were about to get much, much worse. She was right. After that day, Mrs. Patterson seemed to make it her personal mission to find fault with everything Lily did. When Lily turned in her homework, Mrs. Patterson would mark it wrong, even when the answers were correct, writing nasty comments in the margins like sloppy work and inadequate effort. When Lily asked a question in class, Mrs. Patterson would sigh heavily and say, "If you had been paying attention, you would already know the answer." But Lily endured it all. She remembered her mother's words about kindness being like a seed, and she tried her best to be kind even when Mrs. Patterson was cruel. She helped other students with their homework when they were struggling. She always said please and thank you. She never complained, even when Mrs. Patterson's treatment of her became so obvious that some of the other students started to feel uncomfortable. Then came the day in early December that changed everything. The class was taking a big test on science, covering everything they had learned in the past 3 months. Lily had studied hard for it, reviewing her notes every night for a week. She knew the material inside and out. The test was difficult, but Lily worked through each question carefully, double-checking her answers. When she finished, she brought her test to Mrs. Patterson's desk and placed it in the pile with the other completed tests. Mrs. Patterson looked up at her with an expression that Lily couldn't quite read. "You're finished already?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "We'll see about that," Mrs. Patterson muttered, just loud enough for Lily to hear. 3 days later, Mrs. Patterson handed back the graded tests. Emma got a B+ and was thrilled. Other students got various grades, some good, some not so good. But when Mrs. Patterson got to Lily's test, she didn't hand it back. Instead, she held it up for the whole class to see. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps us motivated and reminds us that our stories are making a difference in people's lives. "Class," Mrs. Patterson announced, "I need to discuss something very serious with all of you. Something that goes against everything this school stands for." The room went silent. Every eye turned to Mrs. Patterson. "Lily Chun," she continued, her voice loud and harsh, "has been caught cheating on this test. She copied answers from Emma Rodriguez's test paper. This is completely unacceptable behavior." Lily's heart stopped. "What? No, I didn't." "Do not interrupt me," Mrs. Patterson barked. "I have the evidence right here. Your answers are almost identical to Emma's, and you sit close enough to have seen her paper." "But I studied really hard for this test," Lily protested, her voice shaking. "I didn't cheat. I would never cheat." Emma jumped up from her seat. "Mrs. Patterson, that's not true. Lily and I studied together, that's why our answers might be similar. But she didn't copy from me. She wouldn't do that." "Sit down, Miss Rodriguez," Mrs. Patterson ordered. "This does not concern you." "Yes, it does. You're accusing my best friend of something she didn't do." Mrs. Patterson's face turned purple with rage. "I said sit down. One more word from you, and you'll be in detention for a week." Emma sat down slowly, her hands clenched into fists, tears of anger and frustration running down her face. Lily felt like the whole world was spinning around her. This couldn't be happening. She had worked so hard. She had been so careful. And now she was being accused of cheating when she had done nothing wrong. "Lily Chun," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice now cold and formal, "due to this serious act of academic dishonesty, I am giving you a 0 on this test. Furthermore, I am recommending to Principal Martinez that you be expelled from Riverside Middle School. We do not tolerate cheaters here." The word expelled hit Lily like a physical blow. Expelled. That meant kicked out of school. That meant her mother would be so disappointed. That meant everyone would think she was a cheater. That meant her whole life would be ruined. "Please," Lily whispered, tears now streaming down her face. "Please, I didn't cheat. I promise I didn't cheat." "Save your tears," Mrs. Patterson said with a cruel smile. "They won't work on me. Pack your things and go to the principal's office. Now." With shaking hands, Lily began putting her books and pencils into her backpack. The other students watched in stunned silence. Some looked sympathetic, but most just looked uncomfortable, glad that they weren't the ones in trouble. Emma was crying openly now, and when Lily walked past her desk, Emma reached out and squeezed her hand. "I'll fix this," Emma whispered. "I promise." But Lily couldn't see how anyone could fix this. As she walked out of room 204 with her backpack over her shoulder, she felt like her whole world was falling apart. Principal Martinez was confused when Lily showed up at her office in tears, barely able to explain what Mrs. Patterson had accused her of. The principal made Lily sit down and take several deep breaths before she could get the whole story. "These are serious accusations," Principal Martinez said gently. "But I want you to know that I will investigate this thoroughly before making any decisions. Mrs. Patterson will need to provide concrete evidence of cheating, not just suspicions. I didn't cheat, Lily said for what felt like the 100th time. I studied so hard for that test. I would never cheat. I believe you, Principal Martinez said, and those 3 words made Lily cry even harder, but this time with relief that at least someone believed her. Go home for the rest of the day. I'll call your mother and explain the situation. We'll sort this out. But when Lily got home and told her mother everything that had happened, her mother didn't get angry. Instead, she pulled Lily into a tight hug and held her while she cried. Baby, listen to me, her mother said softly. I know this seems terrible right now. I know it feels like the end of the world. But remember what I always tell you. Kindness is like a seed. Sometimes it takes a long time to grow, but it always grows eventually. You've been planting seeds of kindness all year, even when Mrs. Patterson was cruel to you. Those seeds are going to grow. You'll see. Lily wanted to believe her mother, but it was hard. How could kindness fix this? Mrs. Patterson had made up her mind. She wanted Lily gone, and it seemed like she would do anything to make that happen. The next day, Lily didn't want to go to school, but her mother insisted. You have done nothing wrong, she said firmly. You hold your head up high and you go to school. Don't let anyone make you feel ashamed for something you didn't do. So Lily went to school, even though every step felt like she was walking through deep mud. When she got to room 204, she was surprised to see Emma standing outside the door, along with 5 other students from their class. What's going on? Lily asked. We're not going in there, Emma announced. Not until Mrs. Patterson apologizes to you. Lily's eyes widened. Emma, you can't. You'll get in trouble. We don't care, said Marcus Chin, a tall boy who usually sat in the front row and never caused any trouble. What Mrs. Patterson did to you wasn't right. We all know you didn't cheat. We all studied with you at the library. You know this stuff better than anyone. She's been mean to you all year, added Sarah Johnson, a quiet girl with red hair. We all saw it. We should have said something before, but we were scared. Well, we're not scared anymore. Lily felt tears welling up in her eyes again, but this time they were different tears. Happy tears. Grateful tears. These students barely knew her, but they were willing to stand up for her. Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, her face already twisted in anger. What is the meaning of this? Get into this classroom right now. No, Emma said loudly. Not until you admit that you lied about Lily cheating. Mrs. Patterson's face turned bright red. How dare you? I will have all of you suspended. Then suspend us, Marcus said calmly. But we're not going into your classroom until you tell the truth. For a moment, Mrs. Patterson looked like she might explode. Then she turned on her heel and marched down the hallway, presumably to get Principal Martinez. You guys didn't have to do this, Lily said quietly, overwhelmed by their support. Yes, we did, Sarah said simply. It was the right thing to do. And that's when everything escalated in a way that no one could have predicted. That same morning, something happened that would change everything. Principal Martinez called an emergency meeting with Mrs. Patterson and Lily. Emma insisted on being there too as a witness. They all sat in the principal's office, Lily and Emma on one side, Mrs. Patterson on the other, and Principal Martinez behind her desk. Mrs. Patterson, Principal Martinez began. I've reviewed both test papers carefully. While some answers are similar, that's not unusual for students who study together and understand the material well. I see no evidence of cheating. In fact, Lily and Emma's answers, while similar in content, are written in distinctly different ways. If Lily had copied from Emma, the wording would be more identical. Mrs. Patterson's jaw tightened. I know what I saw. That girl is a cheater, and she doesn't belong in this school. That's enough, Principal Martinez said sharply. Your personal feelings about Lily do not constitute evidence. I am overturning your accusation. Lily will receive the grade she earned on this test, which, according to my review, is 96%, an A. Lily felt a rush of relief, but it was short-lived. Mrs. Patterson stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. If that's your decision, then I have nothing more to say. But mark my words, that girl is trouble, and one day everyone will see it. She stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind her. Principal Martinez sighed heavily and rubbed her temples. I'm sorry you've had to deal with this, Lily, she said kindly. Mrs. Patterson's behavior has been inappropriate, and I will be addressing it with her directly. You should not have been treated this way. But as Lily and Emma left the principal's office, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Mrs. Patterson had looked at her with such hatred before leaving. What would she do next? The answer came faster than anyone expected. Over the next 2 weeks, Mrs. Patterson seemed to go out of her way to make Lily's life miserable. She assigned Lily extra homework that no other student had to do. She moved Lily's desk to the back corner, away from everyone else. She called on Lily in class only to criticize whatever answer she gave. She made snide comments about students who think they're special and people who don't appreciate American values. But the worst part was how Mrs. Patterson tried to turn the other students against Lily. She would praise students who ignored Lily and give extra credit to anyone who didn't associate with her. Slowly but surely, some of the students who had been kind to Lily started to avoid her, worried that Mrs. Patterson would target them next. Only Emma, Marcus, Sarah, and a few other brave students stayed loyal to Lily. They ate lunch with her, studied with her, and refused to participate in Mrs. Patterson's campaign of cruelty. Then, 2 days before winter break, Mrs. Patterson made her final, terrible decision. That morning, she walked into class with a grim expression and a folder in her hands. She placed the folder on her desk and turned to face the class. I have an announcement to make, she said, her voice cold and formal. After careful consideration and consultation with the school board, this was a lie. She had not consulted anyone. It has been decided that Lily Chun is a disruptive influence on this classroom and this school. Effective immediately, she is being expelled from Riverside Middle School. The classroom erupted in shocked gasps and protests. Emma leaped to her feet. You can't do that, Principal Martinez said. Principal Martinez does not make the final decisions about this school, Mrs. Patterson interrupted. I do. This is my classroom, and I decide who stays and who goes. Lily sat frozen in her seat, unable to believe what she was hearing. Expelled. The word echoed in her mind like a death sentence. Her mother would be heartbroken. They couldn't afford to send her to a private school. What would happen to her education? What would happen to her future? Lily Chun, Mrs. Patterson said, pointing at the door. Pack your belongings and leave the school. You are no longer welcome here. With trembling hands, Lily began putting her few belongings into her backpack. Tears streamed down her face, but she refused to sob. She wouldn't give Mrs. Patterson that satisfaction. As she zipped up her backpack and stood to leave, Emma grabbed her hand. Don't go, Emma whispered urgently. This isn't right. We'll fight this. But before Lily could respond, Mrs. Patterson grabbed a piece of chalk and turned to the blackboard. In large, harsh letters, she began to write, Lily Chun does not belong here. The classroom fell into horrified silence as Mrs. Patterson finished writing. She turned back to face Lily with a satisfied smirk on her face. There. Now everyone will remember why we don't. That's when the classroom door burst open with such force that it slammed against the wall. The tall man in the expensive gray suit stood in the doorway, his presence filling the entire room. Every student sat frozen, their eyes wide with shock. Mrs. Patterson's hand was still raised, the chalk dust floating in the air around her fingers. On the blackboard behind her, those cruel words glared down at everyone. Lily Chun does not belong here. I will ask you one more time, the man said, his voice steady but dangerous. What do you think you are doing? Mrs. Patterson's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. This is my classroom. You have no right to. No right. The man took another step forward. His eyes swept across the room, taking in everything. The cruel words on the board, Lily's tear-stained face, the packed backpack in her hands, the shocked expressions of the other students. I have every right to be here. This is a public school, funded by taxpayers. taxpayers like me. Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but you need to leave immediately or I will call security, Mrs. Patterson said, trying to sound brave, but her voice shook slightly. The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. He walked straight up to Mrs. Patterson and handed it to her. My name is Richard Morrison. Perhaps you've heard of me. Mrs. Patterson looked at the card, and all the color drained from her face. Her hands started to shake. You're Richard Morrison? The Richard Morrison. Yes, he said simply. And I came here today to visit my goddaughter and see how she's doing at her new school. Imagine my surprise when I walk down the hallway and hear you screaming about expelling a child. Emma gasped loudly. Every head in the classroom turned to look at Lily, who looked just as confused as everyone else. Goddaughter? Lily didn't have a godfather. At least she didn't think she did. Her mother had never mentioned anyone named Richard Morrison. There must be some mistake, Mrs. Patterson stammered, her face now pale as paper. I didn't know. Nobody told me. Told you what? Richard Morrison asked, his voice sharp as a knife. That you should treat all your students with respect? That you shouldn't write hateful messages on the board? That you shouldn't expel children based on your personal prejudices? These are things you should already know, with or without being told. Mrs. Patterson took a step backward, bumping into the blackboard. Chalk dust puffed up around her. I was just maintaining discipline in my classroom. This student has been disruptive and— Stop lying, Richard Morrison said flatly. I've been standing outside this classroom for the past 10 minutes, watching through the window. I saw everything. I heard everything. And what I saw was a teacher bullying a child. He turned to look at Lily, and his stern expression softened. Lily, sweetheart, are you all right? Lily didn't know what to say. Nothing made sense anymore. Who was this man? Why was he calling her his goddaughter? And why was Mrs. Patterson suddenly looking like she might faint? Lily stared at the tall man in the expensive suit, her mind racing with confusion. She had never seen him before in her life. How could he be her godfather? Her mother had never mentioned anyone named Richard Morrison. And yet, he was looking at her with such concern, such kindness in his eyes, that she felt her heart squeeze painfully in her chest. I don't understand, Lily whispered, her voice barely audible. Richard Morrison's expression grew gentle. I know this is confusing, sweetheart. We have a lot to talk about. But first— He turned back to Mrs. Patterson, and his face became stern again. First, we need to address what's happening here. Mrs. Patterson had backed up against the blackboard, her hand pressed against her chest. The chalk dust was leaving white marks on her brown cardigan, but she didn't seem to notice. Mr. Morrison, please, I can explain. You don't understand the full situation. This student has done absolutely nothing wrong, Richard Morrison interrupted. I've spoken with Principal Martinez. I've reviewed Lily's academic records. I've read the incident reports. And what I've found is a pattern of harassment and discrimination from you, Mrs. Patterson. Emma couldn't stay silent anymore. She jumped up from her desk, her face flushed with emotion. He's right. Mrs. Patterson has been awful to Lily since the first day of school. She accused her of cheating when she didn't. She gives her harder homework than everyone else. She moved her desk away from everyone. And now she's trying to expel her for no reason. Several other students nodded in agreement. Marcus stood up too. It's true. We've all seen it. Mrs. Patterson treats Lily differently than the rest of us. Mrs. Patterson's face turned red, then purple. How dare you students speak to me this way? I am your teacher. You will show me respect. Respect is earned, Richard Morrison said coldly. And from what I've seen, you've earned nothing but contempt. You've abused your position of authority. You've targeted a vulnerable child. And worst of all, you've done it with full awareness of what you were doing. He walked over to the blackboard and picked up an eraser. Slowly, deliberately, he erased the cruel words Mrs. Patterson had written. Lily Chun does not belong here disappeared, letter by letter, until the board was clean again. Lily does belong here, Richard Morrison said firmly. She belongs here just as much as any other student. And you, Mrs. Patterson, need to apologize to her right now. Mrs. Patterson's mouth opened and closed several times. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. For a moment it looked like she might actually apologize. But then her expression hardened, and she lifted her chin defiantly. "I will do no such thing," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "I have been teaching at this school for 23 years. I know what's best for my classroom, and I stand by my decision. That girl needs to leave." The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Every student held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Richard Morrison stared at Mrs. Patterson for a long moment, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. Then, very slowly, he pulled out his phone from his pocket. "Very well," he said quietly. "If you won't apologize, then I'll make a phone call." Mrs. Patterson crossed her arms over her chest. "Call whoever you want. I don't care if you're rich. I don't care if you know important people. This is my classroom, and I decide what happens here." Richard Morrison pressed a button on his phone and held it to his ear. "Hello? Superintendent Williams?" "Yes, it's Richard Morrison. I'm at Riverside Middle School right now, and we have a serious problem that needs your immediate attention." Mrs. Patterson's defiant expression flickered slightly. "The superintendent?" He was calling the superintendent of the entire school district? "Yes, I'm in room 204 with Mrs. Patterson," Richard continued, his voice calm but firm. "I've just witnessed her attempt to expel a student without proper authorization, write discriminatory messages on the blackboard, and refuse to apologize when confronted about her behavior. I think you need to come down here right away." He paused, listening. "Yes, that's correct. Mrs. Patterson. Room 204. I'll wait here until you arrive." He ended the call and slipped his phone back into his pocket. Mrs. Patterson's face had gone pale again. "You can't. The superintendent is a busy man. He won't just drop everything and—" "He'll be here in 15 minutes, Richard Morrison said simply. "Superintendent Williams and I serve on the same charity board. We've known each other for years, and he takes issues of discrimination very seriously." The classroom was so quiet that Lily could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She still didn't understand what was happening or who this man really was, but she felt a tiny spark of hope beginning to grow in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. Emma reached over and squeezed Lily's hand under the desk. Lily squeezed back, grateful for her friend's support. "While we wait for the superintendent," Richard Morrison said, turning to address the entire class, "I want all of you to understand something important. What you witnessed here today, what Mrs. Patterson did to Lily, is called bullying. And bullying is never acceptable, whether it comes from another student or from a teacher." He walked slowly around the classroom, making eye contact with each student. "Some of you probably saw what was happening to Lily and felt bad about it. Some of you might have even wanted to help. But you were scared. Scared that if you stood up for her, Mrs. Patterson would target you next. And that fear is understandable. But here's what I want you to remember. Silence in the face of injustice makes us part of the problem." Marcus nodded slowly. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. Even some of the students who had avoided Lily looked ashamed. "However," Richard Morrison continued, his voice softening, "I also want to acknowledge the students who did stand up for Lily. Emma, Marcus, Sarah, and the others who protested outside this classroom 2 weeks ago. You showed real courage. You did the right thing, even when it was hard." Emma sat up straighter in her seat, and Lily felt tears welling up in her eyes again. But these were good tears. Mrs. Patterson stood rigidly by her desk, her arms still crossed, but her confident expression had crumbled into something that looked more like fear mixed with stubborn anger. She kept glancing at the door, as if hoping someone would come to rescue her, or perhaps hoping that Richard Morrison would simply disappear like a bad dream. But he didn't disappear. Instead, he walked over to Lily's desk in the back corner and knelt down so he was at eye level with her. Up close, Lily could see that he had kind brown eyes with little wrinkles at the corners, like he smiled a lot. His hair was starting to turn gray at the temples, and he wore a watch that probably cost more than her mother made in a whole year. "Lily," he said softly, so only she could hear, "I know you're confused right now, and I promise I'll explain everything soon. But first, I need you to be brave for just a little while longer. Can you do that?" Lily nodded, even though she wasn't sure she had any bravery left. She had used it all up just getting through the past few months with Mrs. Patterson. "Good girl," Richard Morrison said with a small smile. He stood up and turned back to face Mrs. Patterson just as the classroom door opened. Principal Martinez rushed in, her face flushed and her breathing quick, like she had been running. Behind her came a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and a navy blue suit. He had an air of authority about him that made even Richard Morrison look ordinary by comparison. "Mr. Morrison," the man said, extending his hand, "I came as quickly as I could. Superintendent Williams at your service." Richard Morrison shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for coming, Robert. I apologize for the urgent call, but this situation required immediate attention." Superintendent Williams looked around the classroom, taking in the scene. The erased but still faintly visible words on the blackboard. Lily sitting in the back corner with her backpack packed. Emma holding her friend's hand. Mrs. Patterson standing stiffly by her desk, and the other students watching everything with wide eyes. "Principal Martinez has filled me in on some of the background," Superintendent Williams said, his voice grave. "But I'd like to hear directly from you, Mr. Morrison, what exactly happened here today." Richard Morrison nodded and began to speak. His voice was calm and measured, but there was steel underneath it. He explained how he had been walking down the hallway, coming to visit Lily, when he heard shouting from room 204. He described looking through the window and seeing Mrs. Patterson write those hateful words on the blackboard. He recounted her attempt to expel Lily without proper authorization and her refusal to apologize when confronted. As he spoke, Principal Martinez's expression grew more and more troubled. She had known there were problems with Mrs. Patterson's treatment of Lily, but she hadn't realized how bad things had become. When Richard Morrison finished, Superintendent Williams turned to Mrs. Patterson. "Is this account accurate, Mrs. Patterson?" Mrs. Patterson's mouth worked silently for a moment. Then she seemed to gather herself, standing up straighter. "Superintendent Williams, I have been teaching at this school for 23 years. I have always maintained high standards in my classroom. This student," she pointed at Lily, "has been disruptive and disrespectful since the day she arrived. I was simply trying to maintain order and discipline. By writing that she doesn't belong here on the blackboard?" Superintendent Williams asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I was making a point about following rules," Mrs. Patterson said, but her voice wavered slightly. "Students need to understand that there are consequences for bad behavior." "What bad behavior?" Emma suddenly burst out, unable to contain herself anymore. "Lily never did anything wrong. She always does her homework. She's never rude to anyone. She's the nicest person in this whole school. You just don't like her because—" "Emma," Principal Martinez said gently, "please let the adults handle this." But Superintendent Williams held up his hand. "No, let her speak. I want to hear what the students have to say." He turned to Emma. "Continue, young lady." Emma stood up, her hands trembling slightly but her voice strong. "Mrs. Patterson has been mean to Lily since the very first day. She accused her of cheating when she didn't cheat. She gave her extra homework that none of the rest of us had to do. She moved her desk away from everyone else. She ignored her when she raised her hand in class. She made fun of where she came from. And when Lily and I collected food for the Thanksgiving drive, Mrs. Patterson tried to throw it all away just because she didn't want Lily to get credit for anything good." Marcus stood up next. "It's all true. We've all seen it. Mrs. Patterson treats Lily worse than any other student. And it's not fair." Sarah stood up too. "I was too scared to say anything before, but Emma's right. Mrs. Patterson has been bullying Lily all year long." One by one, more students stood up. Soon, nearly half the class was on their feet, all nodding in agreement. Only a few students remained seated, looking uncomfortable and avoiding eye contact with everyone. Mrs. Patterson's face had gone from pale to bright red. This is ridiculous. These children don't understand. I was just trying to teach them about discipline and respect and proper behavior. Proper behavior? Richard Morrison said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Is it proper behavior to single out one student for persecution? Is it proper behavior to falsely accuse a child of cheating? Is it proper behavior to write hateful messages on a blackboard? Those words weren't hateful. I was just... Mrs. Patterson sputtered, but she couldn't seem to form a complete sentence. Superintendent Williams held up his hand for silence. Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to need you to come with me to the administrative office. We have a lot to discuss. Principal Martinez, please take over this classroom for the remainder of the day. Of course, Principal Martinez said quietly. No, Mrs. Patterson suddenly shouted, her composure completely shattering. This isn't fair. I've given 23 years of my life to this school. I've taught hundreds of students. And now you're going to take the word of one troublemaker and her rich friend over mine. The ugly truth of her words hung in the air. One troublemaker. Everyone in the room understood now what Mrs. Patterson really meant, what she had meant all along. It wasn't about discipline or rules or proper behavior. It was about Lily herself, who she was, where she came from, how she looked. Lily felt like she had been slapped. Even though she had suspected this all along, hearing Mrs. Patterson say it out loud made it real in a horrible way. Richard Morrison's face hardened. That's enough. Superintendent Williams, I think you have all the evidence you need. Superintendent Williams nodded grimly. Mrs. Patterson, you're suspended effective immediately, pending a full investigation. Please gather your personal belongings and leave the school grounds. You can't do this, Mrs. Patterson shrieked. I'll sue. I'll go to the school board. The school board will be hearing about this. I assure you, Superintendent Williams said coldly, but not in the way you think. Now please leave before I have security escort you out. For a moment, it looked like Mrs. Patterson might refuse. She stood there, trembling with rage, her hands clenched into fists. Then she grabbed her purse from under her desk, shot one last venomous look at Lily, and stormed out of the classroom. The door slammed behind her so hard that a poster fell off the wall. The silence that followed was deafening. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It was like the whole world had frozen in place. Then Emma let out a long, shaky breath. Is it really over? She whispered. Superintendent Williams turned to face the class, his stern expression softening slightly. Students, I want to apologize on behalf of the school district. What happened to Lily Chen should never have been allowed to happen. Mrs. Patterson's behavior was completely unacceptable, and I promise you that appropriate action will be taken. He walked over to where Lily still sat at her desk in the back corner, still holding her packed backpack. Lily, I am so sorry for what you've been through. No student should ever be treated the way you were treated. And I want you to know that you are welcome at this school. You belong here just as much as any other student. Lily felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in months, they were tears of relief rather than sadness or fear. Thank you, she managed to whisper. Richard Morrison came over and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Can I speak with Lily privately for a moment? He asked Superintendent Williams and Principal Martinez. Of course, Principal Martinez said. You can use my office. As Richard Morrison led Lily out of the classroom, Emma called out, I'm coming too. Lily looked back at her best friend and managed a small smile. It's okay, Emma. I'll be right back. I promise. The walk to Principal Martinez's office felt surreal. Lily's legs moved automatically, one foot in front of the other, but her mind was spinning with everything that had just happened. Mrs. Patterson was gone. Actually gone. After months of cruelty and bullying, it was finally over. But now she had to face the bigger mystery. Who was Richard Morrison, and why had he called her his goddaughter? Inside Principal Martinez's office, Richard Morrison closed the door and gestured for Lily to sit down in one of the comfortable chairs. He sat down across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Lily, he began, I owe you an explanation, and the truth is, It's complicated. Lily waited, her heart pounding. Your father and I were best friends, Richard Morrison said quietly. We grew up together, went to college together, were in each other's weddings. When you were born, your father asked me to be your godfather. I said yes without hesitation. Lily's breath caught in her throat. Her father. She had so few memories of him. He had died when she was so young. But she remembered his laugh, the way he would swing her up onto his shoulders, the sound of his voice reading her bedtime stories. But then your father got sick, Richard Morrison continued, his voice heavy with old grief. And by the time I found out how bad it was almost too late. I was traveling for work, living overseas. I managed to get back just before he passed, and I made him a promise. I promised I would look after you and your mother, make sure you were both okay. But I've never met you before, Lily said, confused. If you're my godfather, why weren't you there? Why didn't you help us? Richard Morrison's face filled with regret. Because I made a terrible mistake. After your father died, I reached out to your mother, offered to help financially. But your mother, she's proud, Lily. She told me she didn't want charity, that she could take care of you on her own. And I respected her wishes. I stepped back. I sent cards on your birthdays, made sure money was deposited in a trust fund for your college education, but I stayed away because your mother asked me to. He ran a hand through his hair, looking older and more tired than he had in the classroom. But then, 2 months ago, I was having dinner with an old friend who lives in Millbrook. He mentioned that the library had a new head librarian, a woman named Susan Chun. I knew immediately it had to be your mother. So I called her. Lily's eyes widened. You talked to my mom? I did. And she told me everything about your father's death, about the financial struggles, about moving here for the library job. She still wouldn't accept direct financial help, but she agreed to let me be part of your life again. She said I could visit, get to know you, be the godfather I should have been all along. He smiled sadly. I was supposed to come meet you last month, but I got tied up with work. Then I was planning to visit this week, during your winter break. But this morning, I got a call from Principal Martinez. She told me about the problems you were having with Mrs. Patterson, and I couldn't wait any longer. I got in my car and drove straight here. Lily sat back in her chair, trying to process everything she had just heard. She had a godfather, her father's best friend, someone who had known her dad, who could tell her stories about him, who wanted to be part of her life. Does my mom know you came today? Lily asked. She does now. I called her on my way here. She's worried about you, but she's also very proud of how brave you've been. Lily felt fresh tears starting to fall. I didn't feel brave. I felt scared all the time. Richard Morrison reached over and took her hand. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared, Lily. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. You showed kindness to Mrs. Patterson even when she was cruel to you. You never gave up. You never stopped trying. That's real courage. There was a soft knock on the door, and Principal Martinez poked her head in. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Lily's mother is here. She just arrived. Mom! Lily jumped up from her chair just as her mother burst through the door. Susan Chun was a small woman with kind eyes and black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wasn't wearing fancy clothes or expensive jewelry, but to Lily, she was the most beautiful person in the world. Susan swept Lily up in a tight hug, holding her close and running her hands through her hair. My baby? My brave baby, are you okay? I'm okay, Mom, Lily said, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. I'm okay now. Susan pulled back and cupped Lily's face in her hands, studying her carefully. Then she turned to Richard Morrison, and her expression was complicated, grateful but also a little angry. Richard, she said quietly, thank you for being here. Thank you for protecting her. But we need to talk about this. You can't just swoop in and... I know, Richard Morrison said, holding up his hands. I know, Susan, and you're right. We do need to talk. But right now, the important thing is that Lily is safe. Everything else we can figure out together. Susan looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Together. Yes. Okay. Principal Martinez cleared her throat gently. Lily, why don't you take the rest of the day off? Go home with your mother. Process everything that's happened. You can come back tomorrow when things have calmed down. Lily nodded gratefully. Suddenly, she felt exhausted, like all the fear and stress of the past months had caught up with her all at once. All she wanted was to go home, curl up on the couch with her mother, and sleep for about 100 years. But as they were leaving the office, Lily remembered something. Emma, I need to tell Emma I'm okay. I'll make sure Emma knows, Principal Martinez promised. Don't worry. As Lily walked out of Riverside Middle School between her mother and her godfather, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real, solid hope that things might actually get better. The December sun was shining brightly, making the frost on the grass sparkle like diamonds. Lily took a deep breath of cold, clean air and let it out slowly. Mrs. Patterson was gone. She had people who cared about her, who would protect her. She had a best friend who had stood by her through everything. And she had a godfather she never knew about. Someone who had known her father and wanted to be part of her life. Maybe, just maybe, her mother was right about kindness being like a seed. Lily had planted seeds of kindness all year, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. And now, finally, she could see those seeds beginning to grow. But as they reached the parking lot, Lily noticed something strange. There was a black car parked near the school entrance, and someone was sitting in the driver's seat, watching them. As soon as the person saw Lily looking, the car's engine started, and it drove away quickly. Lily felt a small shiver run down her spine. Who was that? And why had they been watching the school? Richard Morrison must have noticed too, because his expression became serious. He pulled out his phone and quickly typed something, then put it away. Is everything okay? Susan asked, noticing the exchange. I'm sure it's nothing, Richard Morrison said, but his voice didn't sound as confident as his words. Let's just get Lily home. That evening, Lily sat on the worn couch in their small apartment, wrapped in a blanket her father had given her years ago. Her mother made hot chocolate, the good kind with real cocoa and tiny marshmallows floating on top. Richard Morrison sat in the old armchair by the window, looking slightly out of place in his expensive suit surrounded by their modest furniture. So, Susan said, handing Lily her mug and sitting down beside her, I think it's time we all talked about what happens next. Lily sipped her hot chocolate, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. What do you mean? Well, her mother began carefully. With Mrs. Patterson gone, you'll have a new teacher. Principal Martinez called while you were changing clothes. She's bringing in Mrs. Anderson from the other 6th grade class to take over. She's supposed to be very nice. That's good, Lily said quietly. But something in her mother's voice made her think there was more to this conversation. Richard Morrison leaned forward. Lily, your mother and I have been discussing your future, and there are some things we need to tell you. Lily's stomach tightened with worry. What things? Susan took her daughter's hand. Sweetheart, you know I took the job at the library because it was the best I could find after your father passed. But the truth is, we've been struggling. The rent here is high, my salary is small, and I've been working extra hours just to keep us afloat. I know, Mom, Lily said softly. She had known for a long time, even though her mother tried to hide it. She saw how her mother counted every penny, how she skipped meals to make sure Lily had enough to eat, how she wore the same 3 outfits over and over while making sure Lily had clean, decent clothes for school. Richard has offered to help us, Susan continued, glancing at him. And after what happened today, I've realized that maybe I've been too proud. Maybe it's okay to accept help from people who care about us. Richard Morrison nodded. I'm not trying to replace your father, Lily. Nobody could ever do that. But I made him a promise, and I should have kept it better. I want to help you and your mother have a better life. Not because you need charity, but because you're family. What kind of help? Lily asked cautiously. Well, first things first, Richard said. I own the building you're living in. Lily and her mother both stared at him in shock. You? What? Susan gasped. I bought it 3 weeks ago, Richard explained. The previous owner was planning to sell to a developer who wanted to tear it down. I couldn't let that happen knowing you lived here, so I bought it. And effective immediately, your rent is reduced to whatever you can comfortably afford. Susan's eyes filled with tears. Richard, that's too much. I can't let you. You can and you will, Richard said firmly but kindly. Susan, you're one of the strongest people I know. You've raised an incredible daughter all on your own. You've worked yourself to exhaustion trying to provide for her. Let me help, please, for your sake and for Lily's, and for the memory of my best friend. Susan wiped her eyes and nodded slowly, unable to speak. There's something else, Richard continued. Lily, you're an exceptionally bright student. Even with everything Mrs. Patterson put you through, you maintain straight A's. Your test scores are remarkable, and I'd like to set up a proper educational fund for you, not just for college, but for any tutoring, books, or programs you might want to pursue. Lily felt overwhelmed. A few hours ago, she had thought her life was over. She had been expelled, humiliated, destroyed. And now, suddenly, everything was changing so fast she could barely keep up. I don't know what to say, Lily whispered. You don't have to say anything, Richard said with a warm smile. Just promise me you'll keep being exactly who you are. Kind, brave, and true to yourself. The world needs more people like you, Lily. There was a knock at the door, and Susan got up to answer it. Emma stood in the hallway, bouncing on her toes with excitement. Her parents stood behind her, smiling. Can Lily come to the door? Emma asked breathlessly. Please? Just for a minute. Lily set down her hot chocolate and went to the door. Emma grabbed her hands immediately. Lily, you'll never believe what happened after you left. The whole school is talking about it. Mrs. Patterson is gone for good. And Superintendent Williams came back this afternoon and gave a special assembly about bullying and treating everyone with respect. And everyone, and I mean everyone, was asking about you and saying how brave you were. Really? Lily asked, hardly daring to believe it. Really? Marcus started a petition for students to sign saying they support you. Almost 200 kids signed it. Even kids from other grades who don't even know you. Emma's mother stepped forward. Lily, honey, we wanted you to know that Emma told us everything that's been happening. We feel terrible that we didn't know sooner. If there's anything our family can do to help you and your mother, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you, Susan said, her voice thick with emotion. That means more than you know. After Emma and her family left, Lily returned to the couch, her mind spinning. So much had happened in one day. Mrs. Patterson was gone. She had a godfather who wanted to help them. Her mother wouldn't have to work so hard anymore. Her classmates supported her. Everything had changed. Mom, Lily said quietly, remember what you always told me? About kindness being like a seed. Yes, sweetheart. I think you were right. I tried to be kind all year, even when Mrs. Patterson was mean to me. And now it feels like all those seeds are growing at once. Susan pulled her daughter close and kissed the top of her head. That's because kindness always comes back to us, baby. Maybe not right away, but eventually. Always. Richard Morrison stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the small town below. You know, Lily, what happened today is going to change things. Not just for you, but for this whole school. Other students who were being bullied will feel braver about speaking up. Teachers will think twice before treating students unfairly. Sometimes one person's courage can start a wave of change. Lily thought about that as she finished her hot chocolate. She hadn't tried to be a hero. She had just tried to survive, to be kind, to do the right thing even when it was hard. But maybe that was what being a hero really meant. Outside the window, snow began to fall, soft and gentle, covering the town in white. It was the first snow of winter, and Lily watched the flakes drift down, thinking about how each tiny snowflake was different but beautiful, and how together they could transform the whole world. She thought about her father, whom she barely remembered, but who had loved her enough to make sure she would always have someone watching over her. She thought about her mother, who had sacrificed so much to give her a good life. She thought about Emma, who had stood by her when it would have been easier to walk away. She thought about Marcus and Sarah and all the other students who had found their courage because she had found hers first. And she thought about Mrs. Patterson. Even now, after everything, Lily didn't hate her. She felt sorry for her. Her mother was right. Some people carried so much hurt inside them that it spilled out onto others. Maybe someday Mrs. Patterson would find healing. Maybe someday she would understand that being different wasn't something to fear or hate, but something to celebrate. The black car from earlier was parked across the street. Lily noticed. The same one that had been watching the school. She pointed it out to Richard Morrison. He looked out the window, his expression growing serious. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call, speaking in low tones. When he hung up, he turned to Susan and Lily. "I need to tell you both something," he said carefully. Mrs. Patterson didn't just target Lily on her own. She had support from some people in this town who share her views. People who don't like change, who don't like seeing families like yours move here. That car out there? It belongs to Mrs. Patterson's brother, Frank Patterson. He's been making phone calls, trying to rally support for his sister, trying to get her job back. Susan's face went pale. "Are we in danger?" "No," Richard said firmly. "I've already hired a security company to keep an eye on things. And I've spoken with the police chief, who is taking this very seriously. Frank Patterson likes to intimidate people, but he won't actually do anything. He's a coward like his sister. But I wanted you to know, so you can be careful." Lily felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't completely over after all. There were still people out there who didn't want her here, who thought she didn't belong. But then she looked at her mother's determined face, at Richard Morrison's protective stance, and she thought about all her friends at school who had stood up for her. She wasn't alone. She had never been alone, even when it felt like she was. "We'll be okay," Lily said, surprising herself with how confident she sounded. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Susan hugged her daughter tightly. "That's right, baby. Together." Richard Morrison smiled. "Together," he agreed. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and the black car eventually drove away into the night. Inside the small apartment above the hardware store, 3 people sat together in the warm glow of lamplight, connected by love and loss and hope for the future. The story of the racist teacher who tried to expel a student and the billionaire who walked into the classroom had reached its end. But for Lily Chen, her mother, and her newfound godfather, their story together was only just beginning. Thank you for watching. If you found this story engaging, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective adds value to the conversation. To stay updated with future stories exploring themes of race, inequality, and the unexpected choices that shape lives, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful and thought-provoking content.